In this video, we are going to be discussing about the basic idea of how the web actually works. So for beginners who are just into the web world, I don't think it's very important to mention about it, but still I am going to try to explain what goes on under the hood in a very simple terms. So, what is an internet? An internet, as you all know, it's a global network of computers. These computers have what's called IP address to uniquely identify, just like address for your home, and they are assigned to you by internet service providers. Each computer or router has their own IP address, so they are usually in a form of 4 numbers with dots in between. As you can see in this example, it's actually a Facebook IP address. So there are two types of IP address, IPv4 and IPv6. The IPv6 actually came into existence because IPv4 ran out of IP addresses. So if you want to know more about your IP, just go to Google and type what is my IP and it will show you the current IP address. So if you have multiple devices, for example let's say 2 computers or a smartphone, tablet, etc., each of these will have what's called a private IP address, and that is only local to your network, your home network. However, your router has public IP address, and that's the IP address your internet actually sees all the private ones for each device. Now, the way the computer talks to each other is by using something called a TCP/IP protocol, and a protocol is just a way of communicating between computers. For web developers who are into for web developers, I don't think it's very important to know about it, but HTTP is a little more important for you to understand. So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which actually handles a web traffic. There is also something called HTTPS, which is for secure connection using SSL certificate. Now, HTTP is a application layer protocol. It runs on top of TCP and it is responsible for handling web traffic between browsers like Chrome and Firefox and a web server that stores a website. And we will be talking more about web servers in the next slide. So, HTTP is just a one layer of application layer protocol. There are many application layer protocols like SMTP for email, FTP and SSH. This deals with transferring files over the internet. For web development, HTTP is very important that you need to know. So, what is a web server? A web server is a program that uses HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol to serve the files that form web pages to users. For example, an example of web server might be an Apache or Nginx, etc., which you don't need to know about right now. Technically, you could run web server from your own home, but most ISP providers prohibit you to do that because, for example, if your computer crashes down, all the files will be lost. So I think it's a good thing. But now what you will be doing is you will be building a website on your local machine at your home or office, and then you will upload it to a hosting company or to a web server that the hosting company owns. So there are different types of hosting accounts. So you could actually get a dedicated server which is an actual computer, but it is very expensive. There is also something called a shared hosting accounts, and it is relatively cheaper when compared to a dedicated server. In addition to this, you will be needing something called as a domain name, which can be a .net, .com, .in, etc. Now remember, all these computers, including web server, have an IP address, but it really sucks for you to remember. For example, for Facebook or Google, you have to remember something like 66.220. So what it does is, so when you type in, let's say, https://www.facebook.com, there is something called a DNS that maps the domain to the correct IP address of facebook.com or whatever website you are visiting. Now let's discuss about the process of how a web page actually loads, that we have discussed in the previous slides. So now a user let's say types in https://www.facebook.com in a web browser. That web browser might be Chrome, Firefox, Safari or anything. Now the web browser will the DNS server looks at this domain name and it maps it to the IP address once the web browser gets the IP address, it makes an HTTP request to a server to the IP address of facebook.com, and it returns a response with all the HTML files and whatever files that are needed, like CSS files, and if there is an image in that website, and whatever files that are needed to display it in the web browser. So there are different types of requests, and that are things that you will be learning once you get into scripting or programming, but you don't need to know all about this to build a static website. So this is a brief summary of how a web page actually loads. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video.